If you've been waiting for the next big third-person action shooter, and something that's been compared to some of the greats in the genre, like the Gears of War series and Helldivers 2, then look no further. In less than 1 month from now, Warhammer 40k's newest installment with Space Marine 2 will be releasing on September 9th. And we will be covering everything you need to know about the game before then, covering all the info and mechanics revealed so far. But before we jump right into the video, if you're excited for Space Marine 2 and want some continued coverage for it, go ahead and show it off by leaving a like on the video. Let's try to reach 25 likes on this one. You guys have been crushing the like goal so far, and I thank you guys so much for that. Also, while you're down there, consider subscribing as we will be covering more Space Marine 2 content, other AAA games throughout the year, and have playthroughs and hilarious content as well. Now sit back and relax as we drop into battle and glory as we cover everything you need to know about Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Personally, I've always found the 40k universe interesting, but never really found a way to get into it that's not too confusing for me. And ever since seeing the reveal trailer for this and some of its gameplay, I knew this would finally be the time I would jump into this universe and its lore. As mentioned before, Space Marine 2 is a third-person action shooter, but you could also add hack and slash, since if you run out of ammo, or if you just prefer to, you could always go headfirst into battle, majorly wielding a melee weapon of choice that correlates to your class chosen. The game revolves around 3-player lobbies, and the combat looks phenomenal throughout all of the trailers so far. And from almost everyone who was permitted access to the game early, they say the gameplay is engaging, fun, refreshing, and of course, gory. The game modes you can expect to play while playing Space Marine 2 are a campaign mode, which is listed as 12 hours on Google, but has been reported to be as short as 6 hours. I believe the real time will probably be somewhere in between, in the 7 to 9 hour range. There will also be Operations, which is a game mode to play through replayable missions to earn experience, take on higher difficulty encounters, and earn rare rewards. And then finally we have Eternal War, which is the game's PvP mode, which has little revealed on it so far. The game has some core mechanics that are all nuanced and flushed out that really make the game shine. As the name of the game states, we throughout the game will be taking control of a Space Marine in the Warhammer 40k universe. These are extremely heavily armored super soldiers, as you can see from their armor, that wield some of the heaviest ordnance and weapons available. Because of this, your movement won't be anything to write home about as you play throughout all the modes, at least on some of the classes. But from what I've seen, the movement along with the blend of expansive weaponry and combat features really seems to make the combat shine and look as fluid as it does throughout the trailers and gameplay shown off so far. The movement in the game is left to your standard walk, sprint, standing dodge, and dodge roll. There's no way to jump in the game, but from what we've seen, a couple of classes can augment their movement with the use of abilities like using jetpacks or thrusters that are attached to your armor, allowing you to leap great distances or even charge at your enemies. The game on launch will be featuring 6 classes to play with that we know of so far. These classes all have their own levels and specific perk trees attached to them that can be used in both Operations and Eternal War mode, meaning you'll be able to level them up and use your loadouts while playing in these modes. The classes on launch are as follows: Tactical, Assault, Vanguard, Bulwark, Sniper, and Heavy. Weapons also have their own separate leveling systems, but we'll get more into that later. As far as the classes go, they of course are all unique in their skill sets and perks, but will all also have unique loadouts themselves. For example, every class has different primary, secondary, and melee weapons not only available to them to equip out of the allowed slots, but also may not even use that weapon slot at all. An example of this is the Assault class, which has no primary weapon slot but can use a secondary and a melee weapon slot. Once you know the actual weapon slots the class can use, each class will also have a variety of weapons they can use that are selected to fit that specific class's playstyle. You pick from that limited pool of weapons for the class in question. In layman terms, essentially, even if both a Bulwark and an Assault class have the same weapon slot restrictions available to them, in this case only being able to use a secondary and melee weapon, they could have completely different weapons in the secondary and melee weapon slots available for them to equip, or even have a weapon exclusive in one of those slots to that said class. This all really correlates and defines what not only the gameplay for the game is, but how it can drastically change your playstyle depending on your class as well. The game has a massive array of weapons revealed so far that are true to lore weapons in the 40k universe as well. Along with the ranged weapons, there's also a good variety of lore accurate melee ones too. These play a way larger role in the combat than you would have thought looking at some of the trailers for the game, as ammo conservation looks like a must throughout missions, especially on higher difficulties. Some of these melee weapons are good for taking out a lot of grunts in one swing, other ones are higher DPS, but taking down a large horde is going to be way more of a problem, leading you to being overwhelmed a lot easier. Weapons have their own XP tied to them and need a certain material earned through missions to unlock the higher tiered and deadlier versions for that particular weapon. Along with this, each weapon actually has its own perk tree as well, although the weapon one is a lot more straightforward in providing buffs in a this or that type of skill tree, especially when compared to the skill tree for classes. While going through the separate weapon progression systems attached to each and every weapon, when it comes to melee weapons, there is something very important that you'll need to watch out for. When they are upgraded or changed, there is a chance their defensive attributes will also change too. There are 3 of these defensive attributes and are used when enemies in-game give off a colored indicator. The 3 defensive attributes are Fencing, which gives the biggest perfect parry window on enemies possible, Balanced, which allows a perfect parry but requires way better timing than Fencing, and lastly there is Blocking, which doesn't allow you to parry enemies at all and only allows you to block incoming attacks. The colored indicators coming from enemies mentioned before are telegraphed enemy attacks. You will see them pop up in both red and blue. Red meaning the attack is unparryable and needs to be dodged, and blue meaning it's a parryable attack if you time it right. When you successfully parry an attack, this will lead to one of those cool camera zoom in finishing moves that you've seen in the gameplay, which usually outright kills lower tiered enemies and at least critically injures more dangerous ones. Parries aren't only limited to colored telegraphed attacks. You can try parrying basic attacks as well, which will lead to executing a finisher on them too, but again they aren't telegraphed, so it may be harder for you to pull off. Even if parrying is hard for you to get down, there is an equally important system in the game in the sense of the dodge mechanic as well. If you perfect dodge an enemy attack, you'll notice a small crosshair show up by the dodged enemy's head. If you use the ranged firing button, it will have you pull out your sidearm and perform a counter that will deal massive damage and won't consume ammo. Again, just like parrying, this will outright kill smaller grunt type of enemies while critically wounding harder to take down enemies. Using these 2 mechanics in tandem and efficiently are crucial to being able to survive on the battlefield while completing operations, as not only is it a good way to conserve ammo, not take full on damage, and take down an enemy all in one swoop, but doing these are also the primary way of regaining armor while in the middle of combat. Your class that you choose to play will determine how much armor you actually have to start before hitting your overall health pool, and is important to keep in mind and pay attention to throughout a mission. Making sure you're not running low on shields, or at least staying topped off if your shield count is low due to your class, is vital to getting through and being able to actually beat harder difficulty operations. Sometimes during operations, you can find armor boosts that will add 1 temporary shield bar to you, but once it's depleted or knocked off by an enemy, it will go back to your normal amount of armor for that said class. Lastly, when it comes to combat, and one of the most useful but least found resources are grenades. They don't get restocked when finding munition piles or ammo for weapons, only when you find grenades outright in the world. But boy are they useful for armored enemies, groups of enemies, and taking down some of the named enemies in the game. The enemies in the game are vast. Tyranids come in all shapes and sizes in the game, ranging from the grunts that come in swarms at a time, which are usually easy to take down, the warriors that come in some armor and melee weapons, usually which are a bit harder to take down but still easy enough to deal with. And then after that we have specific named enemies I was talking about earlier. Think of something like Left 4 Dead Special Infected and the different gameplay elements those enemy types include into the gameplay. About the same will be the case here since we have some of those in the game as well. One example is the Lictors, which are stealthy, ambush-focused Tyranids, and I'm sure there's more where that came from on the game's full release as well. The game will also have mini-bosses and full-on bosses throughout some of the operations. So far the bosses are set on certain missions, but apparently mini-bosses have a chance of appearing at certain sections and difficulties of operations at random. Bosses have full-on mechanics and attack patterns that go with them, which could lead to something akin to an Elden Ring boss fight if you're playing on one of the higher difficulties the game has to offer. Getting to the higher difficulties is one of the overall goals for the game, since doing so means more XP, which in turn means leveling up weapons and classes faster, while also getting some of the rare materials needed later on in the game to have your weapons reach max level. With all the mechanics, gameplay elements, modes, and what you can expect to see in terms of enemies all down, let's go into the cool part everyone's been waiting for, the customization. Warhammer 40k has, at least as far as I know, always been synonymous with attention to detail and customization when it comes to your armor and your troops. Weapons are able to be quote-unquote customized, but really it's just you unlocking the various versions of the weapons you're progressing, and you'll have that model as a weapon skin if you like that particular one over other ones down the road, and vice versa. But when it comes to armor customization, there is a lot. Seeing this armor customization system really reminds me of trying to kit out my Spartan back in the Halo Reach days with a bunch of options for the actual armor pieces themselves from essentially head to toe. And they even throw in different patterns, logos, and ornaments you can add to your Space Marine as well. You can earn pre-made sets straight up by completing more and more operations and at higher difficulties too, and are earned on a per class basis. You can also make custom armor sets from all the armor pieces for your currently equipped class that you'll then be able to mix and match from. You then are able to customize almost every part of your Space Marine's armor. This game gives you complete control over your entire look, and gives you some awesome options to choose through just on launch. They let you choose the exact piece of armor you want to have from almost head to toe, the colors that you want to have on your suit of armor, and as mentioned before, even patterns, logos, and insignias to adorn your armor, which will represent your Space Marine in battle, and more. By going to a section that's called Astartes Heraldry, you could use your currency gained from missions to unlock new colors, emblems, armor pieces, and more, to be able to deck out your Space Marine as you see fit. Now be warned, there are two major things I want to point out about this already. 1. The currency you use for this is actually something you'll want to use to move to higher tiered weapons and to harder difficulties first and foremost, because it's the currency you'll also need to upgrade your weapons as well. And 2, sadly there has already been a sighting of DLC in the customization section. We don't know exactly as to what extent the DLC for cosmetics will be, or how much it'll be, but just know it's already been spotted on the menus as people have shown it off while maneuvering throughout the customization menus. Overall, that is everything we know so far about Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Let me know down in the comments what you think about everything so far, and if you're excited to pick up this game on launch, or if you think you'll be skipping out on this one. Personally, I'm super excited to jump into the Warhammer 40k universe head first and try out this game for myself. Overall, what we have on launch looks very promising, and if the multiplayer and grinding for better gear and XP is fun in operations, it could be one of the biggest games for 2024, if it gets timely and proper updates and fixes as it needs it as people reach Endgame. Also, really quickly as we reach the end of the video here, huge announcement for the channel. We have new membership tiers and perks available for the channel. If you're interested in going an extra step and supporting the channel while getting some cool perks in return, consider becoming a member and get the opportunity to be listed in videos just like this one. As always though, your support through viewership, liking, and subscribing is always greatly appreciated and helps me out tremendously, especially against the Tyranid threat that is the YouTube algorithm. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to catch you guys next time. Peace!